We were waiting for Shane Pinto news, Greg. Wasn't this kind of news, though? We didn't expect a 41-game suspension for violating the NHL's gambling policy. And what was your reaction hearing that? Like, to me, that one was right out of the blue.
Yeah, I was not ready for that one, Steve. And actually, my first reaction was, if I were a betting man and you were going to tell me that some guy in the NHL on some team was going to get caught and suspended for this, I would have bet it would be an Ottawa Senator. It just fits in. Although it's the new era, we still have a little bit of Melnick era bugaboo stuff to work out here, I guess. But I find the whole thing a little strange. They're allowed to bet, NHL players that is, are allowed to bet on other sports. So it's not that he was betting on football or baseball or whatever. They've said that he didn't bet on hockey. So I'm not exactly clear on what went down. And I'm a little ticked at the NHL for yet again not releasing details. I understand that part of the arrangement with Pinto, he said, look, I won't appeal it. And I think part of him not appealing it was no details are going to be released. I think that's probably part of the side deal here. But I find it strange. And from what I can have gathered in the last 48 hours or 24 hours, is that all the other NHL executives have been phoning the NHL saying, hey, what exactly went down here? We want to make sure our guys aren't doing the same thing. And the NHL just isn't sharing any information. It's frustrating.
Yeah, and it feels hypocritical to some degree because the NHL has decided to, business-wise, climb into bed with this world. And clearly they, at the heart of this story, have a problem with that world, because why else would you have an issue with an NHL player doing some gambling that has nothing to do with your league? I think the bottom line is that the worry is that if a player got in really deep with, say, a gambling site, and maybe there's an unscrupulous one out there, and that gambling site gives the player a chance to make good on his debt by maybe influencing a future NHL game in some manner, that's, I think, the NHL at the crux of this, their big concern. But to me, if you have that kind of an opinion of that gambling world potential, then maybe you shouldn't be in business with that world.
Yeah, I think it's all about dollars and cents, right? They're making lots and lots of money off of this, the advertising alone, the fact that they get paid for those websites to use their logos. So I think the income, the revenue from it supersedes or is much higher than what they see as any pitfalls or any negatives that are going to come out of it. But I'm with you. I hate this whole thing. I hate that it's advertising everywhere. You can't watch a sporting event now. You can't watch a sports desk or a sports center or whatever their network you're on without a segment devoted to today's lines. It's just proliferate. It's everywhere, and it's irritating. Proliferation.
Yes. There it is. You nailed it. Bam. So the timing of it's kind of interesting. When did a simple, okay, we have a salary cap problem, we can't get Shane Pinto signed, when did that give way to this investigation where they basically put the whole negotiations on pause? Sounds like this thing started back in the summer sometime. They began investigating, and according to Pierre LeBrun from TSN, they didn't let the Sens know until just before training camp, which to me is bizarre. I think that's a misstep from the NHL not to keep the Sens in the loop, but I'm amazed that something that goes way back to the summer was kept under wraps until Thursday, and then it just came out as a bombshell to the entire media world and fans.
Yeah, it kind of puts it. How do you negotiate with a player who may be facing a suspension? I wonder if the NHLPA was involved in the beginning too, and maybe on behalf of the player, they said, "Look, you can't let this get out because it will affect his contract status, or not status, but it'll affect the negotiations." If the Senators were aware that this was happening, maybe they would have approached the negotiations differently to the detriment of the player. So I could see that being a reason why they maybe kept it quiet in the beginning.
It's really interesting. Here's the Sens are in the middle of a 3-game losing slide, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But how much better would they be with Shane Pinto and Alex Formenton in the lineup? Here's 2 restricted free agents, both young, both really potentially could be coming into their own right now, and both of them, for reasons that have nothing to do with hockey, nothing to do with money, just off-ice stuff that, they could be in this lineup right now and helping this team win hockey games. And it almost just, as a Sens fan, makes you go, oh my God, why can't we have nice things? Why does this stuff always happen to the Ottawa Senators?
And the other thing here, Steve, that confuses me is the player is not under contract, and yet he can serve a suspension in games he can't play in anyway. Like they make
Right.
jokes all the time on TSN that Jamie McLennan still has a 1-game suspension to serve. I don't know if you're aware of that. From his last game in the NHL, he took a 1-game suspension. Well, if I can just sit at home and it can be served, then why doesn't it work for him? Why does Shane Pinto? Uh, why does he not have to be signed to miss those games? That's the part that confuses me. You're suspended for 41 games that you're not going to play anyway because you don't have a contract. I thought
Right.
maybe this might be a bonus here that okay, now he's forced to sign something. Maybe they could convince him to say, look, sign your qualifying offer, sign for 850, serve your 41 games, we'll talk later. But no, he doesn't have to sign. There's no pressure now whatsoever on getting him signed until January 23rd.
Yeah, this is really, I mean, it's like being able to put Pinto on long-term injured reserve here now, and thus there's no pressure at all to get the thing done for a while anyway. And there's no pressure from that December 1st thing. I think that was out there for a while. I thought it for a long time that it was a standard. I knew he wasn't a normal RFA.
Right.
He had, I don't know, the different numbers and codes and things along with the RFA status that Shane Pinto had going into this summer. What I didn't know was that because he can't be offer sheeted, that's why he's a different kind of RFA. Because of that, the rules about getting an RFA signed by December 1st do not apply to him. So there was no real pressure point there either. So I don't know when it gave way. It clearly did, I think, at some point where the Sens went from, we can't figure out a way to work out this salary cap to, oh, we literally have to pause this until this investigation is fully complete. And so it's been kind of interesting for sure. And the question goes, what exactly did Shane Pinto do?
Uh-huh.
And I think I've got kind of an inside source on this, and take it with a grain of salt, but they're fairly confident that this is what went down based on their conversations. In that Pinto, they believe, was in Ottawa, asked his buddy back home in Long Island to log into his FanDuel account for him to place a bet on football. And his account is American, so I guess with IP addresses, he can't access it in Canada. So he asked for this favor: log into my account, make this bet for me. So his buddy logs in for him and makes the bet on the football game. But since his buddy is not doing it from the usual IP address that Pinto would use, that's suddenly a red flag that opened up discussions, opened up FanDuel to go, okay, what's going on here? Just check this out. Oh, wait, that's Shane Pinto. Shane Pinto is a famous person, and they would know his whereabouts in all likelihood, depending on when this happened. Maybe there was a game maybe it was last spring or something, and there was a game, and they were in Ottawa, for example. But that opened up a bit of probing, and who knows how long this buddy has had that login. Maybe he was doing some browsing on the hockey side of things. That's where it all stems from. Based on all the conversations I've had, it's a breach for sure. But when you think about intent, Greg, I don't think there was any intent to have a big gambling ring or to bet on hockey or to do anything inappropriate. But I think the NHL is sending a loud message, not just to Shane Pinto about being careful with that stuff, but also to the entire NHL, because there are tons and tons of players who love to gamble on non-NHL games.